thought I had left that house behind. After all, I had moved out 3 months ago, packed my things, signed a new lease, and settled into my new apartment miles away. I was supposed to be free from its grasp. But no matter how much time passed, every night, I dreamed I was still living there. At first, I thought it was nostalgia, my mind adjusting to the change. But the dreams weren't just memories. They were vivid, too real. Every detail of the old house was exactly as I had left it. The old wooden floors that creaked under my weight, the peeling wallpaper in the hallway, even the faint scent of damp that always lingered no matter how much I cleaned. In these dreams, I would wake up in my old bed, in my old room, and everything felt just as it had before I left. Then I would wake up again, this time in my Real bed, in my new apartment. It was disorienting. Every morning, I felt like I was being pulled between two realities. My new apartment was bright, modern, clean. The old house had always been different. Something about it had never felt quite right. I had ignored the feeling for the 3 years I had lived there. Now it seemed it hadn't ignored me. One night, the dream was different. In it, I woke up as always in my old bedroom. But something was off. The air was heavy, thick, almost suffocating. The room was too quiet, as if it were holding its breath. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. I had never felt this much fear in a dream before. I decided to leave the room. Maybe stepping into the hallway would wake me up, the way it usually did. But as I reached the door and turned the handle, a chill ran down my spine. The hallway was there, but outside my room wasn't my old house. It was an endless dark corridor. My breath hitched in my throat. The walls stretched impossibly far, disappearing into a black void. There were no windows, no doors, just an empty passageway that seemed to pulse, as if it were alive. I turned back, trying to retreat into my room, but the door behind me was gone. I was trapped. And then, from deep within the corridor, I heard something. A sound that sent ice through my veins. Footsteps, coming closer. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, echoing unnaturally down the endless corridor. My entire body locked up with fear, but I knew I had to move. Standing still wasn't an option. I turned and ran, my bare feet slapping against the cold floor. The corridor stretched endlessly before me, walls pressing in, the darkness at the far end swallowing everything. I didn't dare look back, but the footsteps behind me quickened. My lungs burned as I sprinted forward, but no matter how far I ran, the corridor never changed. The walls remained the same, smooth and unmarked, the ceiling hanging oppressively low. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. I wasn't just running in a dream, I was trapped in something far worse. Then, just as I felt my strength fading, I saw it. A door. It was identical to the one in my old bedroom, standing alone in the middle of the corridor as if it had been waiting for me. I didn't think. I lunged for it, grabbing the handle, twisting it with all my might. It didn't budge. The footsteps behind me were nearly upon me now, impossibly close. I could feel something looming over me, an unseen presence that radiated malice. With a desperate sob, I threw my entire weight against the door. It flew open. I tumbled through, landing hard on the wooden floor of my old house. For a brief, disoriented moment, I lay there, gasping. The warmth of the familiar room seeped into me. The air smelled the same, like dust and old wood. I sat up and turned, expecting to see the endless corridor behind me. But there was nothing, just my bedroom door, closed as if it had never been opened. A sick feeling twisted in my gut. I was still dreaming, but it felt real, too real. I pushed myself up and staggered toward the window, yanking the curtains aside. Outside, the neighborhood was just as I remembered. The old oak tree in the front yard, the flickering streetlight, the quiet road. But something was wrong. The street was empty, unnaturally empty. No cars, no people, no sound at all. Even the air outside seemed frozen, locked in place. I turned toward my bedroom mirror, and my reflection was watching me, not mirroring my movements, not copying me. It stood still, its eyes locked onto mine, a cold smile stretching across its lips. Then it moved toward me. I stumbled back, slamming against the wall as my reflection pressed its hands against the glass. Its smile widened, twisting into something grotesque. Its mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then, in a whisper that crawled through my bones, it spoke. "You never left." The glass shattered, and I woke up. But I wasn't in my new apartment. I was still in my old house. Couldn't breathe. My heart slammed against my ribs as I scrambled off the bed, my hands trembling. This had to be a dream. It had to be. I had already moved out of this house. This place was supposed to be in my past. But the air smelled real. The rough texture of the wooden floor beneath my feet was real. The sharp sting in my palm from a splinter was real. I wasn't dreaming. I was back. I ran to the door, yanking it open, expecting, praying, to see my new apartment's hallway on the other side. But it was the same old house, unchanged, frozen in time. The dim yellow light from the flickering hallway bulb. The cracked wallpaper peeling at the edges. The faint, musty scent of a place that had been lived in for too long. I stumbled down the hall toward the front door. If I could just get outside, if I could just leave. But when I reached it and twisted the knob, the door wouldn't budge. I rattled it, slammed my fist against it, kicked at it in frustration. Locked. No, not locked, sealed. It was as if the door had been part of the wall all along. No keyhole, no hinges, just a solid, unmovable surface that only pretended to be a door. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. Then I heard it. A soft creaking above me. Slow. Rhythmic. Like footsteps shifting across wooden beams. Something was moving upstairs. My stomach dropped. I wasn't alone. I turned toward the staircase, my body screaming at me to run, but my feet refused to move. My ears strained, listening. The creaking stopped for a moment, then shifted. The weight of whatever was up there was coming closer. Descending, one slow step at a time. I swallowed hard, my entire body stiff with terror. I didn't want to see what was coming. I didn't want to know. But my legs moved on their own, backing away, step by shaky step. A shadow stretched across the wall at the top of the stairs. Long, twisted. Wrong. It wasn't shaped like a person. Then, in a voice that scraped across my mind like rusted metal, it spoke. "Why did you leave?" I ran. I didn't think. I just turned and sprinted down the hallway, my only goal to get away. But as I reached the end, something was wrong. The hallway was longer. Too long. It stretched impossibly far, like the corridor from my dream. The walls warped, the doors on either side vanishing into darkness. And behind me, the footsteps on the stairs quickened. Something was chasing me. I ran. The hallway stretched farther and farther, the doors on either side swallowed by the shadows. My breath came in ragged gasps, my heartbeat a deafening roar in my ears. The thing behind me was getting closer. I could hear its ragged breathing, hear the way its weight dragged across the floor. I didn't look back. I knew if I did, if I saw what was chasing me, I wouldn't survive it. I reached a door at the end of the hallway and threw myself against it, twisting the knob desperately. It wouldn't turn. My fingers clawed at the wood, nails scraping, lungs burning with terror. "Let me out," I screamed. A whisper impossibly close to my ear. "You left. But you never really left." A cold, skeletal hand brushed my shoulder. I let out a strangled sob and slammed my fist against the door one last time. And suddenly it opened. I fell through, hitting the floor hard. The air was different. Lighter. Cold. I gasped, blinking rapidly, my vision swimming. I was in my new apartment. For a long moment, I lay there, panting, staring at the familiar ceiling of my bedroom. The soft glow of the streetlights outside filtered through my curtains. The sound of distant traffic hummed through the walls. I was back, shaking. I sat up, running a trembling hand through my hair. The nightmare had felt too real. My skin was damp with sweat, my heart still racing. But I was here. I was safe. I turned on my bedside lamp, needing light, needing to see something real. My phone lay on the nightstand. I grabbed it, checking the time. 3:12 a.m. A dream. Just a dream. I exhaled shakily and stood up, my legs weak beneath me. I needed water. Something to ground me. I made my way to the kitchen, flipping on the light, breathing in the familiarity of my new home. But as I reached for a glass, my fingers froze. Something was wrong. The air smelled old, damp, like my old house. A chill crawled up my spine. Slowly, I turned, my eyes scanning the apartment. Everything looked normal, but I felt it. Presence. Something was here with me. I forced myself to move, stepping cautiously toward the living room. The silence felt too heavy. Then I saw it. The door to my bedroom. It was different. Wrong. The paint was chipped. The knob was old brass, not the sleek silver handle I had in my apartment. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't my bedroom door. It was the door to my old house. The same one I had tried to escape. And then, from behind it, a soft knock. The knock was soft, almost polite, but I knew better. I stood frozen, staring at the door that had no right to be here. My new apartment was gone, replaced with the past I had tried to leave behind. The old house had followed me. Or maybe, I had never really escaped. The knock came again. 3 slow taps. My breath hitched. My mind screamed at me not to answer, not to go near it. But my body was no longer my own. My feet moved forward, step by step, closing the distance between me and that cursed door. A whisper slipped through the wood, so faint I almost didn't hear it. You were never supposed to leave. My shaking hand reached for the knob. No. I clenched my fist and took a step back, my entire body trembling. I won't open it. The door rattled violently. The knocks turned into pounding. Something on the other side wanted in. The walls around me groaned, as if the apartment itself was warping, reshaping. I stumbled back, gasping. My vision swam. The floor beneath me felt wrong. The smooth hardwood of my apartment turned rough, uneven. The walls cracked, paint peeling, revealing the rotting wood of my old home underneath. No, 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 no. I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I had never left. The realization struck me like ice in my veins. I turned, running for the front door, praying I could still escape. My fingers fumbled at the lock. I pulled. I twisted. It wouldn't open. A sickening voice slithered through the walls, wrapping around me like chains. This is where you belong. The lights flickered. The air turned thick. And behind me the door creaked open. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. I could feel it standing there, watching me, waiting. A slow breath, inches from my ear. Welcome home. The lights went out, and I was gone. Days later, my landlord let himself into my apartment. I hadn't answered my phone. My rent hadn't been paid. But the apartment was empty. There was no sign I had ever lived there. No furniture. No clothes. No personal belongings. It was as if I had never existed at all. Except for one thing. In the center of the empty bedroom, where my bed should have been, there was a single wooden door. Old, chipped paint. And when the landlord reached out to touch it, it knocked. It started with a knock. A soft, almost hesitant tap against my bedroom wall. 3 knocks. Then silence. At first, I thought I had imagined it. My house was old, and at night, the wooden beams creaked as they settled. But this sound was different, deliberate, like someone was knocking from the other side, which didn't make sense, because the house next to mine had been empty for 10 years. I ignored it, told myself it was nothing, but the next night it happened again. 3 knocks. Every night, at exactly 2:13 a.m., it became a ritual. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound. And it always came. Always 3 knocks. Always at the same time. One night, I finally worked up the nerve to check. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The air was thick and heavy, the silence of the night pressing down on me. The neighboring house stood in complete darkness, its windows coated in grime, its porch warped with age. It had been abandoned for as long as I could remember. I walked up to the side of my house, the part that connected to the empty one. My breath fogged in the cold air. Slowly, I raised a hand and knocked on the wall. Knock, knock, knock. For a moment, nothing. Only silence. Then, a single, slow scratch. From inside the wall. I stumbled back, my pulse slamming against my ribs. The scratching continued, deliberate and slow, as if something was tracing its fingers along the wood from the other side. I turned and ran back inside, slamming my bedroom door shut. My chest rose and fell in sharp, uneven breaths. It wasn't possible. There was no one in that house. There hadn't been for years. But that night I couldn't sleep. Because now, the knocking wasn't just at 2:13 a.m. It was happening all night long. And the scratching was getting louder. The knocking didn't stop. It started at 2:13 a.m., like always, but this time it didn't end after 3 knocks. Continued, over and over. A slow, deliberate rhythm against my bedroom wall. My body stiffened beneath the covers, my breath shallow, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then came the scratching. Deep, slow, closer. I could hear it inside the wall, moving upward, as if something was crawling. My fingers dug into the sheets. I wanted to run, to leave the room, the house, everything behind, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, trapped in my own terror. Then something changed. A new sound joined the scratching. A whisper. It was faint, barely audible, but it was there. A voice. Low and raspy, speaking in a language I didn't understand. The words slithered through the wall, curling around me like unseen hands. I clenched my eyes shut. This isn't real. This isn't real. But then, something tapped against my window. I gasped, my eyes snapping open. I turned my head, dread tightening around my throat. Outside, past the thin curtain, something moved. A shadow. Tall. Wrong. Watching. Then it knocked. 3 slow knocks against the glass. I choked on my breath. It was outside. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. Then, from the wall beside me, a soft breath. Let me in. The window burst open. And the lights went out. The window slammed open, and a freezing gust of wind tore through my room, sending the curtains flailing like frantic hands. The breath in my lungs turned to ice. I scrambled back against the headboard, my pulse pounding in my ears. Outside, the night was too dark. The streetlights, the moon, everything had been swallowed by a suffocating black void. And in that darkness, something moved. A shape taller than any person, its limbs too long, too thin. It stood just beyond the reach of the dim glow from my bedside lamp. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel it staring. Then it spoke. Let me in. The voice came from the wall behind me, not the window. A sick, crawling horror slithered up my spine. I turned slowly, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The knocking had stopped. The scratching had stopped. But now something was pressing against the wall. The wallpaper stretched, bulging outward as if something inside was pushing to get through. I could see it. A handprint, pressed against the surface. Long fingers splayed wide. A second hand joined it. Then a third. And then a face. A pale impression, stretching the wall outward. Its mouth open in a silent scream. I bolted from the bed. This isn't real. Can't be real. My mind raced as I stumbled toward the door, my fingers fumbling with the knob. Run. Get out. Now. But the door wouldn't open. The knob twisted uselessly in my grip, the wood rattling but refusing to give. My breath hitched. No, no, no. Behind me, the whispering grew louder. That same foreign language, curling through the air like smoke, filling the room with a suffocating presence. Then the wall tore open. A deep, wet rip like flesh being peeled apart. I turned just in time to see the hands emerge. Long, gray fingers clawed through the gaping hole in the wall. Arms, too thin to be human, dragged a thing through the opening. And then I saw its face. It was me. No, not me. Not exactly. It looked like me, but its eyes were wrong, black, hollow pits. Its mouth hung open too wide, too empty. A jagged grin split its face in half. It crawled out of the wall, limbs twisting unnaturally. It reached for me. I screamed. The lights flickered violently. The whispering exploded into a deafening roar. The wind howled through the open window. I squeezed my eyes shut, and everything went silent. For a long moment I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then, a gentle knock. 3 slow taps. I opened my eyes. I was standing in my bedroom. My real bedroom. The window was shut. The wall was whole. Had it been a dream? I let out a shaky breath, my entire body trembling. My hands were ice cold. My heart pounded against my ribs, but everything looked normal. I turned to my nightstand. My phone was there. The time read 2:14 a.m. 1 minute had passed. 1 minute. And then, just as I was beginning to convince myself that it had all been a hallucination, the knock came again. From inside the wall. The knock was soft. 3 slow taps. I stood frozen, staring at the wall, my entire body locked in terror. The room was silent except for the wild pounding of my heart. Then came the scratching. Slow, deep, like nails dragging through wood from the inside. My stomach twisted. No, this wasn't possible. The wall was solid. There was nothing there. Nothing should be able to move inside it. But the scratching continued, deliberate and hungry. I backed away, my legs weak beneath me, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The room felt wrong. The air was too thick, pressing in around me like an invisible force. The walls seemed closer. And then the whispering began again. That same low, rasping voice, speaking in a language I didn't understand. The sound seeped through the wall like smoke, curling around my head, slipping into my ears, my mind. I clenched my hands into fists. Wake up. This has to be a dream. But I wasn't asleep. The whispering grew louder. More voices joined in. A chorus of hushed, desperate pleas. I recognized one of them. It was mine. A chill flooded through me, my body stiffening. I wanted to run, to throw open my bedroom door and get out of this house. But my legs wouldn't move. The whispers dug into my skull, pressing against my thoughts, pulling me toward the wall. And then, something pushed back. The wall bulged outward, like a bubble about to burst. A face pressed against the surface, stretching the wallpaper outward. It was me. My own mouth moved soundlessly. My hollowed-out eyes locked onto mine. The bulging wall ripped open. The thing inside crawled out. I screamed. Its body slid free from the gaping hole, dragging itself onto my floor. It was thin, too long, too wrong. Its limbs bent in unnatural ways, its head twitching at an impossible angle. It opened its mouth, too wide, too dark. It whispered in my own voice, "Let me in." The lights flickered violently. The whispers exploded into a deafening roar. The walls groaned, shaking, cracking apart. I slammed my hands over my ears. "Stop! Leave me alone!" And then, everything went silent. I gasped for breath, my entire body trembling. The room was normal again. The walls were whole. The whispers were gone. I was alone. My legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the bed, my breath shuddering. What the hell just happened? Then, from outside, a soft knock. Not from the wall. From the front door. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The house was silent. The air felt heavy, thick with something unseen. The knock came again. 3 slow taps. I pushed myself up, forcing my legs to move, every nerve screaming at me to stay in the room. But I needed to know. I needed to see. I stepped into the hallway, my bare feet silent against the wooden floor. The air was colder here, my breath coming in soft, visible puffs. I reached the door. I hesitated. Then, with shaking fingers, I unlocked it and pulled it open. The night outside was empty. No wind. No movement. Just a long, endless darkness. And then, just as I was about to slam the door shut, something stepped forward. From the black. It was me, pale, hollow-eyed, smiling. It lifted a hand and whispered, "Let me in." The door ripped open, and the darkness swallowed me whole. The darkness pulled me in. Couldn't see. Couldn't breathe. The air was thick, pressing against my skin like cold, wet hands. My ears rang with silence, a silence so deep it felt like the world had been erased. Then, slowly, the whispering began again. Soft, slithering voices. All around me, I turned, desperate for light, for anything that could orient me. But there was nothing. Only the voices growing clearer, sharper, drilling into my skull. And then, I heard my own voice among them. A sick, choked whisper. "Help me." My chest tightened. No, this isn't real. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to wake up, to pull myself out of whatever nightmare I had stumbled into. But when I opened them again, the darkness had changed. Shapes loomed around me. Walls. Not just any walls. My walls. I was back in my room. But something was wrong. The bed, the furniture, gone. The wallpaper was peeling, revealing dark, rotted wood underneath. A damp, moldy smell filled the air, the scent of something long abandoned. I turned toward the door, and froze. Something was standing in the corner. A shadow, tall and still. Watching. I stepped forward, and the light from the hallway illuminated its face. It was me, pale, hollow-eyed, grinning. "I told you to let me in." It lunged. I screamed and threw myself backward, my body slamming against the wall. Pain shot through me, but I barely noticed. The thing wearing my face moved fast. Too fast. I twisted, grabbed the door handle, and yanked. Locked. My own voice whispered in my ear. "This is where you belong." The walls groaned. The floorboards creaked. I turned, and the wall behind me started to move. It breathed. A deep, slow inhale. The wallpaper stretched and contracted, as if something massive was inside, pressing against the surface, waiting to be born. Then, the wall split open, not like drywall breaking, like flesh tearing. Hands. Asterisk asterisk gray, skeletal hands. Asterisk asterisk clawed out of the gaping wound. Fingers dug into the floor. A face, inhuman and grinning, pushed through. It wasn't my double. It was something else. Something that had been watching me from inside the walls all along. My mind snapped. I threw myself at the door, screaming, pounding, kicking, anything to get out. The thing behind me let out a slow, rattling breath. Then, a knock. From the other side of the door. 3 slow taps. A voice, familiar and cold. "Are you ready to let me in?" The walls collapsed, and the darkness took me. Days later, a realtor arrived at my house. I hadn't answered any calls. The place was empty. The furniture was there. My clothes. My phone. Everything was untouched. Except for one thing. On the bedroom wall, where my bed used to be, the wallpaper was peeled back. And beneath it, deep scratches, like fingernails had clawed from the inside. The realtor stared at the markings, heart pounding. Something about them felt wrong. Then, a knock. 3 slow taps. From inside the wall. It was a normal morning. I woke up, went through my routine, grabbed my keys, and stepped into the hallway of my apartment building. Then I noticed it. The door across from mine, apartment number 47, was gone. Not locked. Not blocked. Gone. In its place was a plain, unbroken wall, smooth as if nothing had ever been there. My stomach twisted. I blinked, shook my head, rubbed my eyes. Maybe I was still groggy. Maybe I was imagining things. But the hallway was too quiet. Usually, I could hear music, the hum of conversation, the distant sound of a TV coming from number 47. But now there was nothing. I turned to the door next to mine and knocked. Mrs. Callahan, my elderly neighbor, opened it. Her face crinkling into a polite but confused frown. "Everything all right, dear?" I forced a smile. "Yeah. Do you remember the people in number 47? Her brows furrowed. "What?" "Apartment number 47. I gestured across the hall. "You know, the couple who lived there? Mark and Sophie." Mrs. Callahan's face remained blank. Then, she shook her head. "There's never been an apartment there, dear." My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? I let out a nervous chuckle. It was right there. I used to hear them all the time. I even borrowed sugar from Sophie last week. She gave me a sad, almost pitying look. Are you feeling all right? That wall has always been there. I turned back, my throat dry. The wall looked old, as if it had been part of the building for decades. Mrs. Callahan sighed. You should get some rest, dear. And then, as if the conversation had already slipped from her mind, she closed the door. I stood there, my pulse hammering in my ears. I knew what I had seen. I knew what had been there. So why was I the only one who remembered? I stood in the hallway, staring at the wall that shouldn't exist. Apartment number 47 had been there. I knew it had been there. I had seen Mark and Sophie just days ago. I had heard their music through the walls, seen Sophie in the elevator, borrowed sugar from her last week. And now, it was like they had never existed. My pulse throbbed in my ears. I stepped forward and hesitantly placed my hand against the wall. The surface was cold, solid. No cracks, no sign that a door had ever been there. But something about it felt wrong. The air near it was colder than the rest of the hallway. And when I pressed my ear to the wall, I heard something, a faint, muffled sound, like whispering. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. I wasn't imagining it. Something was on the other side. I had to prove to myself I wasn't losing my mind. I rushed down the stairs to the building manager's office. Mr. Garcia, a gruff man in his 60s, looked up from his paperwork as I burst in. Hey, weird question, I said, forcing my voice to sound casual. What happened to apartment number 47? He frowned. What do you mean? The one across from mine, I pressed. It's just gone. When did they seal it off? His frown deepened. He leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. There was never a number 47. A chill crawled up my spine. That's not possible, I said, my voice thinner now. I knew the people who lived there. His expression didn't change. You must be mistaken. I wasn't mistaken. I opened my mouth to argue, but something about the way he was looking at me made my skin crawl. Like he knew something. Like he was hiding something. I swallowed hard and backed toward the door. Never mind. His gaze followed me as I left. Back in my apartment, I paced my living room, trying to make sense of it. Could I really be losing my mind? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my texts. There. A message from Sophie last week. Hey, can you buzz me in? Mark forgot his keys again. All proof. But when I clicked on her contact, the message thread vanished. My stomach lurched. I tried to call her. This number is not in service. I tried Mark's. Same thing. The messages, the calls, all gone. Like they had been erased. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. My hands were shaking. I grabbed my laptop, my fingers flying over the keys. I searched their names, their social media, nothing. No profiles. No records. I checked my building's tenant list. No apartment number 47. No Mark and Sophie. Like they had never been there at all. But I knew the truth. I had seen the door. I had heard the whispers. And I wasn't the only one who knew something was wrong. Because as I sat there, my pulse pounding, a new email appeared in my inbox. No subject. No sender. Just 4 words. Don't look for them. I stared at the screen, my hands ice cold. Then, a knock. 3 slow taps. From inside the wall. The knock came again. 3 slow taps. From inside the wall. Couldn't breathe. My fingers hovered over my laptop keyboard. My mind racing. There was no apartment there. No door. But something was. I stood slowly, my legs stiff, my skin crawling with an unnatural cold. The air felt heavier near the wall, like the space around it was pressing inward. I swallowed hard, taking a step forward. Then the whispering began, muffled just like before. But this time it was closer. I pressed my ear to the wall. At first it was just faint, incoherent murmurs. But as I strained to listen, the words became clearer. A voice weak, desperate. Help us. I jerked away, my blood turning to ice. The whispers grew frantic. More voices joined in, overlapping, pleading. Please, let us out. They're keeping us here. Don't let them erase you too. A deep, dragging scratch ran down the wall, like fingernails clawing from the inside. I stumbled back. This isn't real. This can't be real. Then, my phone vibrated. I grabbed it with shaking hands. A new message. No number. No name. Stop. I stared, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then, another message popped up. A photo. My stomach dropped. It was my hallway, taken from the other side of the wall. I scrambled backward, my breath coming in sharp gasps. Something was watching me from inside. The third message appeared. Last warning. The lights flickered. The whispers stopped. Then, a new sound. A click. I turned toward my front door. The deadbolt had unlocked itself. Slowly, the door creaked open. Beyond it was no longer my apartment hallway. It was black, a void, an endless, yawning nothingness. And standing in that darkness was a figure. Tall, motionless, no features, no face, just a towering, impossible shadow. Watching me, waiting. Then, in the silence, a whisper. Come with us. The door flew open, and the darkness rushed in. The darkness spilled into my apartment. I scrambled backward, my body screaming to run, but there was nowhere to go. The lights flickered violently, the air turning heavy, pressing against my chest. The figure in the doorway didn't move. It just stood there, tall, still, watching. The whispers had stopped. The knocking had stopped. But I could feel them. Dozens, maybe hundreds, trapped just beyond that impossible blackness. And then, the figure stepped forward. I lunged for the door, slamming it shut with a force that rattled the walls. My hands fumbled for the lock, twisting the deadbolt. Silence. I backed away, my breath coming in shallow gasps. My skin was ice cold. The apartment around me was still too quiet. I turned, and the wall where apartment number 47 used to be was gone. Not a smooth, sealed-over wall like before. Just nothing. A dark, endless void stretched before me, swallowing everything. My apartment had been cut off. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, it all ended there. And somewhere, deep inside that darkness, I heard a voice. You shouldn't have looked. The lights cut out. I was plunged into complete blackness. Then, a hand grabbed my wrist. Cold, thin, fingers too long. I screamed. A sudden force yanked me forward. My feet left the ground. The darkness swallowed me whole. And then, nothing. I woke up somewhere else, flat on my back. The air was damp, thick with dust. A faint, flickering light buzzed overhead. I sat up slowly, my head pounding. My breath hitched in my throat. I was in a hallway, but not my hallway. It looked old. The walls were cracked, the floors warped with water damage. The numbers on the doors were rusted over, unreadable, except for one, directly across from me. Apartment number 47. My stomach lurched. No, this isn't possible. The door stood open. Beyond it was pitch black. And inside that darkness, a shape began to move. Not walking, crawling, toward me. I turned, ran. The hallway stretched on forever. The doors lining it were all wrong. Too many of them, stacked at impossible angles, some leading into pure black voids. I skidded around a corner and slammed into something solid. A wall. The hallway behind me was gone. There was no way out. Then, a whisper right next to my ear. You belong here now. The lights flickered, and everything collapsed into darkness. The darkness swallowed me whole. I felt like I was falling, tumbling endlessly through a void that had no up, no down, no end. The whispers returned, soft at first, then rising into a chaotic, suffocating storm. You shouldn't have looked. They erased us. Now it's your turn. A cold hand brushed against my arm. Then another. Hands grabbing me, pulling me deeper. I fought, thrashing, screaming, but they wouldn't let go. The darkness twisted around me, pressing against my chest, crushing the air from my lungs. Then, a door, peering out of nowhere, floating in the void. I lunged for it, tearing free from the hands, my fingers scraping against the wood. The whispers shrieked in protest as I twisted the handle and threw myself through. I hit the ground hard. Light. Noise. I gasped, my body shaking. I was lying on the floor of my apartment hallway. My real hallway. The world was normal. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The faint sound of a TV drifted from down the hall. My door was in front of me, slightly open, just as I had left it. I turned. Apartment number 47 was back. The door was there again, solid, real. But something was wrong. The number plate was different. The paint fresher. As if the door had just been put there. As if it had never been gone. I scrambled to my feet, backing away. My entire body was trembling. I didn't understand. Had I imagined everything? Had I? The door to number 47 creaked open. I stopped breathing. The apartment beyond was empty. No furniture. No lights. Just a dark, yawning space. A space that stretched too far. Deeper than the building should allow. Then, you should have let them erase you. The door slammed shut. The hallway light flickered. And when I blinked, apartment number 47 was gone again. Like it had never been there. Like I had never been there. And behind the wall, the knocking started again. The landlord gave me only one warning before I moved in. Don't open the windows at night. No matter what. I laughed at first, thinking it was some old superstition. But the look in his eyes stopped me cold. Promise me, he said. I promised. And for the first few nights, I listened. The apartment was small but cozy. Old hardwood floors, a creaky radiator, and a single bedroom with a large window overlooking the quiet street. During the day, everything seemed normal. But at night, something felt off. The air got too still. No wind, no distant city sounds, no insects. Just a deep, suffocating silence. And then came the knocking. It started on the third night. A gentle tap against the glass. I froze in bed, my heart slamming against my ribs. I lived on the third floor. There was no balcony, no ledge. No way for someone to be outside my window. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, patient. I pulled the covers over my head and squeezed my eyes shut. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, the feeling was gone. The window looked normal. No marks. No sign that anyone or anything had been there. I told myself it was my imagination. The pipes. The old wood shifting. Anything but what I knew deep down to be true. That night, the knocking came again. But this time there was a voice. A whisper. Calling my name. Not from outside. From under my bed. The whisper froze me in place. It came from directly beneath my bed. Soft. Insidious. Like someone was pressed against the floorboards. Their mouth inches from my ear. Calling my name. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. My breath hitched in my throat as the whispering continued. Slow. Dragging out every syllable. Then, the knocking at the window returned. 3 slow taps. My pulse slammed against my ribs. No, this isn't happening. The whispering stopped. The room fell silent. But something shifted beneath me. A slow, scraping movement, like fingernails dragging across the wood. I finally found my voice. I lunged for the light, flipping it on. The room was empty. The knocking had stopped. The whisper was gone. But I knew something had been there. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called my landlord. What the hell is going on in this apartment? There was a long pause. Then, his voice came back, flat and quiet. You opened the window, didn't you? My stomach dropped. No, I said quickly. But something was in here. A sigh. Then it's already too late. My grip tightened around the phone. What does that mean? Another pause. Then his voice lowered. It's looking for a way in. A chill ran down my spine. What is? He didn't answer. Then click. The line went dead. I stood there, the silence in my apartment pressing against me like a heavy weight. And then, the closet door creaked open. The closet door creaked open. I stood frozen, My breath caught in my throat. The room was still, but something about the darkness inside the closet felt wrong. Like it was watching me. I took a slow step back. My phone was still gripped in my hand. The call with my landlord dead. The silence in my ear deafening. Then, a whisper. From inside the closet. "Let me in." I choked on my breath, my body locking up. The voice was mine. I spun on my heel, bolting for the front door, yanking it open, and froze. The hallway outside was gone. Not dark. Gone. An endless black void stretched before me. I stumbled back into my apartment, slamming the door shut, my pulse hammering against my ribs. The room wasn't the same anymore. The walls looked older. The floorboards warped. The air smelled different, like damp wood and decay. The knocking came again. 3 slow taps. I turned toward the window, and saw it. A shadowy figure standing just beyond the glass. On the 3rd floor, its face was pressed to the window, hands resting against the glass. But there was nothing beneath it. No balcony. No ledge. It was floating. And then, it smiled. A slow, stretching grin, too wide, too unnatural. I stumbled backward as a hairline crack formed on the glass. Then another. And another. The window was breaking. I ran to the bathroom, slammed the door shut, and locked it. My body shook violently as I pressed my back against the wall, trying to control my breathing. I could still hear the knocking. Faint, but insistent. Then something brushed against my foot. I looked down. The vent. The air vent near the floor had been moved, pushed open. And from inside the vent, a voice whispered, "You shouldn't have opened it." The whisper slithered out from the vent. "You shouldn't have opened it." A wave of nausea rolled through me. My hands trembled as I pressed myself against the cold bathroom wall. My mind screaming, "This isn't real. This can't be real." But the voice was real. Came from inside the vent. I slowly leaned forward, forcing myself to look. The metal grate had been pushed aside. The slats were bent outward, like something had crawled out. The air inside the vent was too dark. And then, a hand reached out. I scrambled backward, choking on a scream. The fingers were long, too thin. The skin stretched too tight over its bones. The hand twitched, then dragged itself across the tile floor. And another knock came from the window. Tap, tap, tap. "Don't look. Don't look." But my body moved on its own. I turned my head toward the door. Through the crack beneath it I could see the shadow. Something was standing outside, waiting. Then, slowly, the bathroom door handle began to turn. No, no, no. I lunged for the vent, shoving the grate back into place, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The knocking at the window grew louder. The door handle twisted harder. Then, everything stopped. Silence. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The air felt thicker. And then, from just outside the door, a whisper. My own voice. "Come out." The lights flickered, and the lock on the bathroom door clicked open. The lock clicked open. I pressed my back against the wall, my chest rising and falling in sharp, panicked breaths. No, no, this isn't happening. The door handle turned slowly. A long, deliberate movement. Then, the door creaked open. An inch. Then 2. Then more. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. The space beyond the doorway was wrong. Not my apartment anymore. Just an endless black void. And standing in that void was me. Pale. Grinning. Waiting. It whispered in my voice. "You let me in." My body locked up. The air turned freezing. The thing that wore my face stepped forward. The walls of the bathroom began to bend, shifting inward. The ceiling stretched, the light above me flickering violently. I tried to move. To run, to escape. But my body was no longer my own. My double reached for me. Cold fingers brushed my arm. And then, glass shattered. The window. The thing at the window had broken through. I snapped out of my trance and ran. I shoved past the doorway, bolting blindly into the darkness. My apartment was gone. The walls, the floor, nothing was real anymore. Then, I saw it. A window. A single window, floating in the blackness, glowing faintly. The only thing left. I had no choice. I jumped through it. I woke up on the floor of my apartment. The morning sun streamed through the window. The air was still normal, as if nothing had ever happened. My heart was hammering, my body drenched in cold sweat. I turned toward the window. It was shut. No cracks. No sign of breaking. Had it all been a nightmare? A hallucination? I forced myself to stand, my legs shaking beneath me. My phone lay on the floor beside me. I picked it up, checked the time. 6:47 a.m. I had survived the night. A weak, relieved laugh slipped from my lips. I was okay. Then I saw it. On the inside of the window pane, a single handprint, too large, and too many fingers. And outside, something moved, watching, waiting. I stepped back, my breath caught in my throat. Then, a knock, 3 slow taps, and a whisper from under my bed. You shouldn't have opened it. A figure stepped forward. Not Mark, not Sophie, me, perfect copy. Smiled, and whispered. It started with a noise. Every night, just as I was about to fall asleep, I would hear it. A soft creaking sound, like old wood shifting. At first, I thought it was just the house settling. That's normal, right? Old buildings make noise. But then I started to notice a pattern. The sound wasn't random. It happened at the same time every night. And it wasn't just the wood creaking, it was movement. Like the walls were breathing. I tried to ignore it. Put in my headphones. Drowned it out with music. But every night, without fail, just as the clock hit 3:12 a.m., the noise would start. A slow, stretching groan from inside the walls. Like something waking up. Then, one night, I decided to listen. I turned off the music, held my breath, and placed my ear against the wall. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, I heard it. A soft, wet inhaling sound. And then, someone breathing. From inside the wall. I stumbled back, my heart slamming against my ribs. No, that's not possible. But the breathing continued. Slow, deep, deliberate. I ran out of the room and slept on the couch that night. In the morning, I told myself I had imagined it. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But then I noticed something. The walls of my bedroom looked different. The wallpaper was slightly wrinkled, as if something had shifted beneath it. Something alive. I stood there, staring at the walls of my bedroom, my stomach twisting into knots. The wallpaper was different. Not torn, not damaged, but wrong. It was wrinkled, uneven, like something beneath the surface had moved. I ran my hand over it, feeling for anything unusual. The surface was cold. A strange dampness clung to my fingertips. Then, a soft shift, like something adjusting itself. I yanked my hand back, my breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. No, this isn't happening. I tried to convince myself it was just bad insulation, warped wood, anything but what it really felt like. Then the breathing started again. Deep, slow, right behind the wall. I stumbled backward, my pulse hammering. This isn't my imagination. Something is in there. I needed proof. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and held it against the wall at an angle. The light exposed every imperfection, every bump, every crease in the wallpaper. And then, I saw it. A handprint, pressed from the inside. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a faded stain or an old mark. The fingers were long, stretched, like something had pushed against the wall recently, like it was still in there. The breath on the other side hitched. It knew I was listening. I backed away slowly, refusing to blink, refusing to look away. Then, the wallpaper bulged outward. A shape pressed against the wall, shifting beneath the surface. I ran. I bolted out of the room, slamming the door shut behind me. My body trembled, my chest rising and falling in rapid, panicked breaths. What the hell was that? What the hell was living inside my walls? I barely slept that night, curled up on the couch, every light in the apartment left on. But even here, even in another room, I could hear it. The slow, deliberate creaking. Like something moving. Like the house was alive. Like it knew I was afraid. I didn't go back into my bedroom the next day. I left the door shut, trying to pretend like whatever was inside couldn't get out. But I could still hear it. The slow, steady creaking. The quiet, deliberate shifting. As if something inside the walls was stretching its limbs. By nightfall, exhaustion forced me to lie down on the couch. But I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening. 3:12 a.m. Right on time. The walls groaned. But this time it wasn't just in my bedroom. It was in the living room. I shot up, my heart pounding. The apartment felt smaller. Like the walls had inched closer. Then, a sound that made my stomach twist. A whisper. Not words. Not a voice. Just the faintest dry exhale. Something was breathing behind the walls. And it was closer than before. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, my hands trembling. Slowly, I ran the light across the living room wall. The beam flickered. My fingers felt numb. Then, a shadow moved beneath the surface. A shape, long and twisted, pressed against the wallpaper. And then it moved its head. I saw the outline of a face. It wasn't a person. The proportions were wrong. The head was too long, too thin. The limbs stretched too far. Pressed closer, pushing against the wall from the inside. The wallpaper stretched and strained, as if the only thing keeping it from stepping through was a thin layer of old glue and paint. Then a fingernail dragged across the surface. A long, slow scratching sound. I choked on my breath, stumbling back. This isn't real. This can't be real. Then, the walls shuddered, like something inside was waking up. I grabbed my keys and ran. I didn't stop until I was outside, panting in the cold night air. The apartment building loomed above me, dark and silent. I stood there, gasping, my mind racing. I needed to leave. I couldn't stay here. Then, I looked up, my apartment window, and I saw it. A shape standing behind the glass. Not a person. Something taller. Something watching. Then, the window bulged outward, like something inside was pushing to get out. I stood in the cold night air, staring up at my apartment window. Something was standing behind the glass. Not a person. Too tall. Too thin. The shape was blurred by the darkness, but I could feel its eyes on me. Then, the window bulged outward. The glass didn't break. It stretched, like something inside was pressing against it, trying to push through. A wave of cold, paralyzing terror crashed over me. No, this isn't possible. I took a step back, my breath fogging in the air. My body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't look away. Then, a single handprint appeared on the inside of the glass. Long fingers. Too many fingers. It dragged downward, smearing the fog on the window. And then, it knocked. 3 slow taps. I stumbled back, my heart slamming against my ribs. I need to leave. Now. I turned and sprinted down the street, my keys clenched in my shaking hand. I didn't stop running until I was in my car. The doors locked, my breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to calm down, trying to think. Then, my phone buzzed. A text message. My stomach twisted as I picked it up, my fingers trembling. There was no name, no number, just a single word. Come back. A cold chill ran through me. Then another message appeared. A photo. I clicked on it, and nearly dropped my phone. It was a picture of me, standing outside my apartment, taken from inside the window. I looked up, my blood turning to ice. My apartment was pitch black. But in the window, I saw it. A shape, barely visible. Watching. Then, my phone buzzed one last time. Another message. We're already inside. The lights in my car flickered. The air around me shifted. And from the back seat, a voice whispered, "So are you." A whisper from the back seat. "So are you." My entire body locked up. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. Every instinct in me screamed, "Don't look." My breath came in short, panicked gasps. My hands clutching the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The air behind me felt wrong. Heavy. like something was sitting there, waiting. I could feel the weight of its gaze, pressing against the back of my skull like a physical force. Then, a slow, deliberate scratch ran across the leather of my seat. Long, dragging fingernails. I clenched my teeth, my pulse hammering. This isn't happening. This isn't real. Then, knock, knock, knock. Not from the window, not from the walls, from inside the car, right behind my head. I snapped. With a scream, I threw the car into drive and floored it. Tires screeched against the pavement as I tore down the road, my hands trembling against the wheel. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Couldn't. But I knew it was still there. I could hear it breathing. Then, my phone vibrated. Another message. I didn't want to look, but I did. One sentence. You're taking us with you. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded to a stop in the middle of the road. My entire body shook violently. The breathing behind me stopped. The air in the car shifted. Then, a new sound. The soft, slow groan of wood. Like something moving. Like the walls were shifting. I turned my head, and my car wasn't a car anymore. The interior had changed. The seats, the dashboard, the windshield gone. In their place, walls. Dark, warped wood. I was inside. Inside them. Inside the walls. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Then, the space tightened. The walls pressed in closer, closer. Like the house was swallowing me whole. Then, darkness. Days later, my landlord unlocked the apartment. I hadn't answered my phone. No one had seen me. My rent was overdue. But the apartment was empty. My clothes were there. My phone was there. But I wasn't. The landlord sighed, shaking his head. Another tenant gone. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye. The wallpaper near the bedroom had wrinkles, as if something underneath had moved. Then, a faint, barely audible knock. From inside the wall. He froze. Then, ever so faintly, a whisper. Let me out.